Okay, good morning everyone. My name is Irena. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to present my talk today. And it is so good to be here and a good honor and privilege to be part of the faculty. So it's a big achievement for me because by gaining the faculty certificate, I have made my first step towards gaining the diploma, which is not a very easy task, as some of you already probably know. So my studies with the faculty have given me access to immense amounts of knowledge, and my learning experience over the past years has been one of receiving a great deal of patient tutoring by these wonderful, knowledgeable women, the tutors at the faculty. Why do I say patient? Because I come from a scientific background, and everyone who studied science would probably agree how difficult, calculative, and stubborn we can be sometimes, as we are very well connected to our left brain. So it is a brain that we associate with the faculties of science and math, shapes, logic, verbal reasoning, rational, analysis, and facts. However, to understand astrology, you need a little bit more than that. You need to be tapping into the right brain, which we associate with the faculties of art and sensation, nonverbal reasoning, imagination, intuition, creativity, emotions, and understanding of three-dimensional forms. It was extremely difficult for me to understand astrological symbols in non-verbal way. I had to change the way I think and the way I process information, the way I analyze the world around me, and a lot of knowledge I gained over the years had to be completely buried alive and then transformed. I had to keep up with all the questions rising from an extremely calculative, judgmental, rational brain. I must admit that I haven't been that long in this ancient art history of astrology. However, I've been an active observer and keen inquirer for more than 20 years. I have been trying to analyze and understand astrology all this time in a scientific way. I was not very fascinated with the night sky, the stars and galaxies to begin with. Instead, I was more an indoor person, interested in forces behind the night sky and behind the perfection and beauty and harmony of the universe, wondering about creation and principles that are operating in the nature. So I naturally went to study science and then medicine as the most tangible, visible, and measurable source of knowledge. I was so excited learning new things and connecting the dots happily using my left brain. However, in 1999, I met a lady through a friend who is a professional astrologer. So one day over coffee, I witnessed something very interesting, which was rationally impossible, according to my skillful, arrogant scientific mind, an event that was to change my life forever. So as I mentioned earlier, I was enjoying my cup of coffee when the phone rang. The astrologer lady picked up the phone, and she was quiet for a while. Then she hung up and called somebody else. They were talking together in some archaic coded language, and then she hung up again. So my astrologer friend then called the first lady, the one she was talking to earlier, and she told her to call the hospital. This was the hospital where, after an accident, her husband was fighting for his life, and to give the doctor the following information, that the blood clot is on the right side of his body, going towards the heart artery, and that the patient needed anticoagulants immediately. So this clinical procedure took about an hour. The lady called back to say that the hospital has done the scan, and that they located the clot exactly where she had located it and described, and that anticoagulants were given immediately. Her husband was now recovering, he was fine and stable. Then I learned that the third lady she was talking to over the phone was also an astrologer, medical astrologer. And this wasn't the first time they saved this poor man's life. I was sitting on a chair in absolute shock and silence. I was rationally thinking in my mind, what on earth has just happened, and why has nobody ever mentioned at medical school the occurrence of this phenomena? So the more I thought about it, the less answers I was getting. So I made a semi-conscious decision and stopped thinking in that direction. because it just didn't take me anywhere. So I carried on with my medical studies in the same way as every other normal person would do. So by the play of synchronicity, as Dr. Jung would put it, I came to London and I quit medicine. I went again into science, and I was more and more unsettled. So I had more questions than ever, and I ended up like everyone else on Google, which eventually, again, by divine intervention, led me to enroll with the Faculty of Astrological Studies. So here I got the opportunity to finally challenge everything I ever knew about astrology. I tried to prove to myself and possibly others that its place is not in science and that astrology doesn't work. I can still clearly hear Cat Cox's laughter in my head when I mentioned this. I was even thinking of quitting on many different occasions during my 3 years course. I tried to, because it just didn't seem to work for me. I could clearly see it was working for everybody else. So fortunately, I managed to keep up with the journey. This was thanks to very, very patient and wonderful ladies, my tutors that I mentioned earlier, but also my fellow students with whom I made a very strong connections over the years, and some being here, from whom I learned immensely, for which I'm very grateful. And yes, transiting Uranus through my 9th house helped a little bit. I learned to slow down, and I learned to connect more to my right brain and to use my other senses. By doing this, I learned a lot about myself. So first and foremost, to appreciate myself as a unique human being as I am and as we all are. I learned to accept and embrace the differences because I could make more sense of them. But most importantly, I learned humbleness and tolerance, discipline, and respect for our creation, a majestic force, the power much greater than ourselves. The astrology kept stretching my brain above every measurable limit. I understood that it is more complex than psychology. It is as precise as mathematics and physics, maybe not exact, but certainly as entertaining as mythology and transcends above all known religions. When I was asked to talk about astrology, the future of an ancient art, I realized that for me, astrology is timeless. It is a doorway into the past, the present, and the future at the same time. It is a doorway into the universal code, the silent language of symbols. A language that in modern times we struggle understanding, hearing and seeing and decoding because of so much focus and emphasis on the visible, undetectable and tangible part of our existence. If we can't measure it or see it, it doesn't have a value. But we know for a fact that we can only see 0.0035% of electromagnetic spectrum, and that's the little circle around the 2 lines in the middle. So with that in mind, should we solely rely on our 5 senses to guide us in life and disregard all the other possibilities of our existence? Perhaps we may not be able to measure the influence of the moon on our DNA, yet we certainly cannot deny her influence on the ocean tides, our body fluids, and the waxing and waning of gestation period in animals, or indeed DNA and nature in general, as observed by Claudius Ptolemy, a great mathematician, astronomer, astrologer, and many others. Maybe we are just using the wrong measuring parameters. If we change our perception and shift our attention, maybe we can learn to train and stimulate our brains in a more fluid way, like we do in arts and music, imagination, or storytelling and connection to the source. Maybe that way we can be able to embrace the wisdom of our predecessors and use astrology in collaboration with modern sciences to be better and to thrive as humanity, and learn to live in harmony with nature and ourselves, rather than enslaving these natural resources to suit our individual needs. We also need to remember that biological centers for intuition and imagination lie within the same part of the brain. Maybe that is why astrology can be challenging and confusing, because we cannot tell the difference between the two. Thus, astrology can be often overlooked as practically useless or unreasonable. I would like to elaborate why I think astrology definitely has more to offer if we are to look at it from a different angle. It is something that I came across for the first time in 2016 by one of the speakers at the AA conference. I decided to follow on his idea and do a little experiment. And who better to experiment upon than your own children? So they were 6 and 8 at the time, and still not fully rationally developed. My husband is laughing there. I had asked them to feel and describe the symbols of Venus and Saturn that I drew on a piece of A4 paper with a marker pen. It was a very simple, nothing like sophisticated as this, very simple drawing. At first they were confused as to how to connect to a piece of paper with the feelings and thoughts and then to put them even in words. So after a few moments of explaining, and as soon as they closed their eyes, the word came pouring out. My son gave up after the first run, as he got too tired of stretching his right brain. It is hard work indeed, especially if you're not using it on a regular basis. So here are some of the associations. So on the left, my daughter called out love, friendship, imagination, confident, happy, positive, have fun together. And then my son on the right pointed at Jesus, important, takes care, calm, positive, and happy. And you probably noticed the same thing as I did. My son's first association with Venus was Jesus. I was wondering in my mind what Jesus and Venus have in common. But he was very persistent. He repeated a few more times, so I've written it down. I didn't want to interrupt or impose my own opinion on him, so I just scribbled it down. And I didn't pay too much attention until recently when I was preparing for the talk. So I dig my papers out, and then I started thinking about that Jesus-Venus relationship. I was thinking actually to leave it out, but I remember how important it was for him. So I decided to include it, but I went online and simply typed what Jesus and Venus have in common. So to my amusement, a few websites came up, and indeed there was a connection between Venus and Jesus. So the book of Revelation 22:16 says that I am the root of the offspring of David and the bright morning star. And then again in 2 Peter 1:19, we also have the prophetic message. It's something completely reliable, and you will do well to pay attention to it, as to a light shining in the dark place until the day dawns and the morning star rises in your heart. We all know that Venus is indeed the brightest star of all in the sky, and they call it bright morning star because of dazzling glow with a steady silvery light. I'm still not too sure what to make out of this at this point because it just came last week, but I just thought it was too interesting discovery and I wanted to share it today. So on associations with Saturn, my daughter came up with a standing up for myself story that she experienced at school. She told me that she has a problem with this girl who was constantly bullying her, and she decided that enough was enough. And she used the words, you know, when I stood up for myself, and the glorious feeling that comes after that, the power, strength, fearless, sensible, love, energetic. So then she went again. I was quite surprised she used the word love again. And at that point, I pointed at the word and I said, why did you use love for two different things? Because it just didn't make sense. I thought it was something she was randomly throwing out. But then she says, the first love, with the Venus associated, she says, that's how you love your friends or your brother. And that's, sorry, what I've written in there, friends or brother love. And she says, this Venus is how you love your mom, or how the God or mom loves you. So, and we know from psychology that mom's love is unconditional, and we also know that God's love is unconditional. And her mom is Capricorn. with a ruler, Saturn ruler, and so is she. So no wonder she was related to Saturnian energy in the form of unconditional love, and relating to Saturn with positive associations, as she is quite familiar and comfortable with the type of energy, even though her experience was not as positive as her associations. But that is something that Saturn is pushing us to do, to be uncomfortable but still stand up for ourselves and be fearless in order to learn and mature and gain our own authority. So maybe somebody else would use slightly different associations and explain it in a more restrictive or limited way. But this just shows how different relationships we have to these symbols. Yet symbols have retained their unique meaning, their language, and their energy. These and other examples I have encountered during my astrological studies made me conclude that we are all responding to symbols, images we see and feel, and their silent, non-verbal language of energies, even though we may not be consciously aware of them. Otherwise, when you think about it, marketing companies wouldn't invest so much money into something that doesn't work. At the same time, it is very interesting to observe how our clients, our colleagues, our family, or friends are responding to their own astrology charts as well, how skillfully we are playing the role that's been given to us upon birth, and how it shapes and influences our daily lives, our decisions, and our life aspirations. And again, we are completely unaware of it, unless we study astrology or visit an astrologer. As a further example of this relationship with symbols and planets, I found in the passage from a Bible that beautifully describes the silent language. And it says, "The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they reveal knowledge. They have no speech, they use no words. No sound is heard from them. Yet their voice goes out into all the earth, their words to the end of the world. In the heavens, God has pitched the tent for the sun." We live in the world and times where the visible and physical are everything. And we are all put under extreme pressure by society and the media to thrive, to compete and work really hard in order to achieve perfection and ultimate happiness, whatever it may be. But we all know that according to science, for a person to be happy, there is a long list of hormones that need to be in perfect balance first. These hormones are not controlled by excessive shopping, by indulgence in sugars or foods, but through a knowledge, truth and inner peace, and balanced heart and mind, through faith and promise that above and beyond our humdrum existence there is something greater than us. I discovered that knowing astrology for me is about having that knowledge, tuning my senses to the subtle language, the silent speech that uses neither words nor sound. And if we are quiet enough, we can still clearly hear it. It is about enjoying the journey and having faith in a universal plan. It is about giving sense and purpose to our life, without which our life doesn't have the value. I've read a quote somewhere that God allowed us only to mess up with 5% of our human DNA, meaning 95 is still intact, locked, waiting to be discovered with respect, dignity, and honesty. And I feel the same applies to astrology. We need to be proactive in seeking and pushing boundaries and asking the right questions, challenging the limitations of our visible realm and mainstream science. Today, we can already see the great benefit of astrology in psychology. And remember, we haven't invented anything new. We are just reinventing knowledge that our ancestors already possessed and used, which we are hopefully be able to refine to suit our needs in today's conflicted society. Even Hippocrates, who is referred as the father of medicine, whose oath was traditionally taken by all new physicians, has said, "A physician without a knowledge of astrology has no right to call himself a physician." And what he was referring to, and why this part hasn't been explored, tested, and used in today's or modern science and medicine. More than 20 years ago, I read an article where an astrologer has predicted times when mothers will use astrology to raise their children. And I thought I wouldn't be living long enough to see this change, as it was unthinkable and unimaginable that astrology will flourish like this in the near future. But I had forgotten one thing, that I was that mom, that some of you are that mom as well. If we encourage parents to use astrology while raising their children and help them fulfill their dreams and their true potential and not mom's and dad's own expectations, we may be able to build a stronger, healthier society full of potential, love, acceptance, and respect for each other. Even more so, we would be better equipped to embrace the uniqueness and strengths and weaknesses of others and understand how to achieve that perfect balance in ourselves and in our society. This knowledge has been hidden, distorted, challenged, misused, and misunderstood for centuries. We have been trained not to use our brain's full capacity and senses by focusing on one type of education that promotes only certain activities. So my vision for the future of astrology as an ancient art would be to learn what our ancestors have already known and take it to the next level with the knowledge we have today. We can achieve this by keeping an open mind, surpassing the limits of the visible, and manifesting symbolic archetypes beyond the boundaries of our personal ego. So I would like to finish off with the insightful quote by one of the greatest minds in science of our time, Albert Einstein, who said, "The intuitive mind is sacred gift, and the rational mind is faithful servant. We have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift." Thank you very much.